My name is Jim Showalter. I was born and raised on a dairy farm in northern Indiana. It was 280 acres. We had about 35 head of dairy cattle, and then lots of hogs and turkeys and chickens. And we had, when I was young, 6 horses. Dick and Ned and Barney and Daisy and Babe and Molly. We also had modern tractors, but my father loved to work with horses. Used it a lot in cutting down hay and raking it, plowing potato patches, things like that. And used horses up and pretty much until into the 50s. My father was born in East Las Vegas, New Mexico, and then was raised in South Bend, Indiana, and his grandfather owned 200 acres, and then mom and dad owned 80 acres. So we had these 2 farms next to each other. Dad was a terrific mechanic with equipment, and he had the most gentle hands with animals, and particularly horses. He could get a pair of horses to do just about anything that could be expected of him. And one proud moment is when he took the 2 big Babe and Molly, went down and pulled a truck out of the ditch that all the tractors in the neighborhood getting out in the wintertime back in the early 50s. That was fun. My mother was also born in northern Indiana. She was a very modest lady, hardworking but very modest lady. She raised us 4 kids. There were 4 of us. My oldest was my sister, Janice. Dale was the oldest brother. Ron is in the middle, and I'm the youngster. In the home we grew up in was built in 1865. I can remember probably 5 or 6 years ago that they put in the bathroom as off the end of the parlor, so we could have indoor plumbing. Mom originally can cook with wood burning stove, and we had one wood burning stove in the living room, and then the rest of the house was unheated. So it was interesting. My 2 brothers and I go to bed. The oldest one would send us up to get the bed warmed up, and then he'd come up and jump in the middle, and that worked for a few years. But brother Ron is let's start with Janice. She was a farmer's wife. She also did a lot of work in a marketplace over in South Bend, and she also drove school buses. She raised a family of 4. She was outstanding girl in the state of St. Joe County for 4-H a number of years, and also won medals at Indiana State. Her mom would do a lot of food preservation, baking, clothing, all the things that would be important in a home. Did a great job of it. Dale was, oldest brother Dale he was a handful when he was younger, but he got married when he was 18 years old, and by the time he got married, he was already out of high school, was working at South Bend, the Studebaker plant there in their proving ground area, and had a morning program on one of the local radio stations, early morning radio stations, and starting to raise a family. So, but he ended up being the owner of a pretty good size GMC truck dealership in Goshen, Indiana, and retired from that. And a couple years later, was asked to take over to be the head of the bank that was First Source Bank, put in Goshen, Indiana. Did a nice job of that for 4 or 5 years. The sad part of it was he's the one member of our family that liked to smoke. He said it was enjoyable to him. He didn't do it much, but he did it. But in the long run, the cancer got him, and he died well-respected businessman. He enjoyed working with people and selling cars and knowing a lot about it took to have a successful dealership, and he did a great job of it. Brother Ron wanted to be a school teacher, which was a good thing in our family, and eventually became a president of a junior high, or principal of a junior high school. But he didn't care as much for that as he did doing counseling and teaching, and he did a full lifetime project of that. And let's see, we other things going on in the farm. By the way, Mom, one thing she did was a little different. She's quite an adept. She held the record in high school of winning a statewide contest and a number of words per minute on an upright underwood at a 10-minute test of 110 words a minute. She used to write out her Christmas list in shorthand, which we never could decipher. And she also had a job in the wintertime, in this late winter, early spring. She also did income taxes for small businesses in the area we grew up in. Trying to think of some of the other things we talked about. My folks both died when they were quite young. My mother, unfortunately, had multiple problems with heart problems as a result of getting from a fever when I was in the first grade, and she died 2 weeks after I got out of high school. So when I was the youngest, she was a great lady. I lost my father from a tragic accident when he was rear-ended with his tractor on a road we lived on, and the end of all that bad is that we lost Dad when I was in 55 and Mom in 56. In 56 when I graduated from high school. Working on the farm with four of us, 4 kids. We had a lot of fun. Played a lot of basketball. Basketball is big in Indiana, and we had 2 of the largest barns in the state up there. And we always make sure one court was open by the time basketball season come around. And we had lit court upstairs. We could play evenings or daytime. On Sundays at noon, a lot of the local high school players would come over and play with us guys. Basketball. In fact, one of my first cousins played there up to his sophomore in high school, went to Dallas, Texas, and became a all-state center, and then went to SMU, and he was all-state Southwest Conference 2 years, and went to the Final Four in the basketball tournament in, I believe it was 1955. Most of the crops we grew were of I think it was feed for our livestock, because particularly the cattle took a lot. One of the nice parts about growing up on our farm was that I was just old enough to realize how a lot of the farming was done in the old days, like in the 10, 20, 30s of the 1900s. We used to originally take all our hay in. It was mowed with tractors and put on wagons with a hay loader, and then taken up in big slings. It was loose hay, and pulled up in the top of the barn and positioned over old hay mows and then dumped. And it was interesting, but a lot of hard work. We also hand-picked corn by hand. Mom and Dad picked most of our corn in those years, and of course corn pickers came along and replaced all of that. Thrashing of wheat and oats and rye type grains. It was done with we used to have this big steam tractor thrashing machine pulled into our barnyard, and we'd haul the loose hay and the straw up there, the heads in the straw up there, and they would thrash them on the spot. But in during the middle of the Second World War, we were able to purchase a thrashing machine behind a tractor where all this was done in the field, and took away so much of that kind of work. Anyhow, it was fun to see that. I really enjoyed tractors and running of mechanical equipment. Dad was a great mechanic and showed me, was very patient with me, and teaching me the things to do with tractors and how to be safe. Safe more than big issue on a farm. You have such large equipment and machinery and large livestock. Of us 3 boys, none of us ever even so much as broke a finger on the farm in all the years we were growing up on a farm. But there were some times when I almost lost my life, but Dad was extremely patient about most things except safety, and so we were very careful, because these machineries, corn pickers, combines, hay balers, thrashing machines, all that stuff were very dangerous. But I liked to do, Brother Ron liked to take care of the cattle more than I did, and Malcolm and I was more enjoyable going out in the fields and running all kinds of corn picking, combining, planting, baling, all kinds of tractors, and really enjoyed doing that. My father was my big champion. He always, every morning my job was to get the grease gun out, and if it was a corn picker, go around and hit every grease zerk on the whole machine, one shot every long day of work, and those machines, and then look for things that were wrong while you were lubricating it. And by the time you got in the field, you knew you were going to go all day with probably no problems. Dad even used to put the big combine we have in the barn in the middle of winter. He'd hook up to it with the big tractor and run it right in our thrashing floor of the barn, just to listen and see everything work, because all kinds of parts and devices on there. And so that when it was ready to need it in the spring to do the oats, first ones up, it was ready to go. Fortunately, Brother Ron likes the cattle. And in my senior year of high school, I went to high school half days and finished my high school education, but pretty much did the farming on the 280 acres as far as the field work. All that for that year there and the year that followed. But I enjoyed it. It was fun to see things grow and prosper and do well. The reason I wasn't a farmer, why I decided not to be one, was the terrible tragedies it had with my mom and dad, because they both died in their 40s. They essentially worked themselves to death on those farms. I never saw my mom and dad take 1 day's vacation in all the time that I could remember them. It was because livestock, particularly dairy cattle, do that. And dairy farming, as Dad used to say, you got a paycheck every month, but you had to be there every day of the year to get it and to make that kind of money. Anyhow, I went off and did different things in California, but I still enjoy the thoughts of growing up with my brothers, my sister, and my family. And we'll always treasure those times. And I thank you.